Everyone, Laudetur Jesus Christus, praise be Jesus Christ. This is Matt Gaspers, Managing Editor of Catholic Family News, and I'm joined as always by my friend and colleague, Dr. Brian McCall, who is the Editor-in-Chief of CFN. Hello, Brian. Happy Feast of St. Mary Magdalene of Pazzi to you.
Yes, to you as well. We had a powerhouse week this week with saints.
Indeed, we did. I'm going to go through the all-star lineup of saints that have featured in the traditional liturgical calendar this week. So, for starters, we're coming to you on Friday, May 29th, 2020, and there has indeed been a very powerful lineup of saints this week. Going back to Monday, May 25th, we celebrated the feast of Pope St. Gregory VII, who was a late 11th century pope, and he's actually referenced in Brian's front page article in the May paper. Some of you probably already read it. The article is called "The Death of Libertas Ecclesiae in Time of Pandemic." Pope St. Gregory VII was instrumental in defending the liberty of the church. I don't know if Brian had a comment he wanted to add before I move on.
Yes, no, he really was a perfect timing with that. Most people probably getting their paper around now, hopefully, and his feast day falling maybe around the time you were reading it. And he really is a pope for this time, as we're going to see in really our last story this week, as the church has fallen silent, defending the principle that he spent his papacy defending.
Yes. Then the next day, Tuesday, May 26th, was the feast of St. Philip Neri, a 16th century saint. He was kind of post-Protestant revolt, and was actually known as the Apostle of Rome, as I understand it, in his day, because he brought so many people back to the true faith and also to real piety. He founded an order called the Oratorians, and was very well known and loved in the city of Rome during his lifetime. He died in 1595. Wednesday and Thursday were a couple of, one was a native English saint, St. Bede the Venerable, May 27th, who died in the year 735, was an English Benedictine monk and a doctor of the church. I believe he authored a rather important history of the church in England. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, the ecclesiastical history of the church in England, which is the main source for much of what we know about early Christianity.
Yes.
About him, you may wonder why he's called Bede the Venerable if he's a saint. Well, the reason is actually he was so perceived to be so holy during his life that even before he died, people were referring to him as Bede the Venerable. But I mean,
yes,
he wasn't declared venerable officially.
When I first learned about him, I was confused. I couldn't tell, is he a venerable or is he a saint? And then you finally realize it's St. Bede the Venerable.
Yes.
And the next saint, the following day, is one that he surely wrote about in his famous history, St. Augustine of Canterbury. He often probably gets overshadowed by another Augustine that we're more familiar with, of Hippo. But St. Augustine of Canterbury is famous in his own right for being the apostle of England and the first Archbishop of Canterbury. And we hope and pray that someday the see of Canterbury will be returned to her rightful owners.
Mm-hmm.
And no longer occupied by the arch-layman, as we say, of Canterbury. Yes. And then finally today is the feast of St. Mary Magdalene of Pazzi, another 16th century saint. So she would have been a contemporary of St. Philip Neri. She lived from 1566 to 1607 and was an Italian Carmelite nun and mystic. I believe she was either born in Florence or that's where she lived, or possibly both. I can't recall the details. So really a powerhouse lineup of saints this week. And I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on, why do we take time on this show to remember the saints? And the main reason is because they give us hope. And that's a big part of why we venerate the saints in general, not only because it's due to them in justice for what they did in their lives and it's the will of God, but it also for our benefit to give us hope that we too, who share the same fallen human nature, the only saint conceived without original sin, of course, is Our Lady. Everyone else had the fallen nature, had concupiscence. But because of their lives, we know that we also can achieve sanctity by God's grace, even in our fallen state. And there's a great passage I want to read from the St. Paul's epistle to the Hebrews, chapter 12. The first couple of verses says, And therefore, we also, having so great a cloud of witnesses over our head," he's referring to the communion of saints in heaven, "laying aside every weight and sin which surrounds us, let us run by patience to the fight proposed to us." That's a hallmark in the lives of all the saints. They understood that this life is a warfare, as it says in the book of Job. The life of man upon earth is a warfare, a spiritual warfare, as St. Paul talks about in Ephesians chapter 6. So he continues in this passage from Hebrews, "Looking on Jesus, the author and finisher of faith, who, having joy set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and now sitteth on the right hand of the throne of God." Last week, of course, we celebrated the feast, the great feast of the Ascension of our Lord, as we say in the Creed that he ascended into heaven and sits at the right hand of God, the Father Almighty. And that's ultimately his will, his desire for each of us is to be in heavenly glory with him. And the saints remind us that that really is possible.
And yeah, and just pause on that to emphasize something we talk about a lot at Catholic Family News. What Matt just described really emphasizes fundamentally the difference between the traditional canonization process of the church and the shadow of that John Paul II instituted. Because in that passage from St. Paul, when he says "so great," what he means by that in the Latin is so huge, so enormous, not in quantity, like we would have so many saints, but in greatness, in largesse.
Right.
That's exactly what the old canonization process standard was. It wasn't just, oh, this person made it through the gates of heaven. They skidded through, they finished, they got there. It meant not did they just get over the hurdle, they exhibited heroic virtue. They won the race, in St. Paul's terminology, not they just made it to the finish line.
Right.
What the new process is all about, and even in modern contemporary understanding of it, is, oh, let's find anybody who we think made it into heaven. And that's what most people think. Oh, canonization is a declaration this person made it to heaven. Actually, not at all. The real purpose of canonization is this saint in heaven exhibited such heroic virtue that they should be elevated to the altars so that they can be a model in all things because they so far exceeded, and to give us that hope. Like if they can jump to the sky, we should be striving for that, not just striving for like, hey, I got in at the last second. And again, that whole emphasis, what the whole modern canonization process teaches is this sort of egalitarian, democratic, like everybody wins. Look at all the people that made it through the gate, as opposed to who are, in secular terms, right? Who are the Alexander the Greats of history, right? Who are the people that didn't just, be in history, but transformed it? And that again, beyond all the details, is the major difference between traditional process and today.
And I'll just add to that, we have an amazing series coming out in the forthcoming June paper that's has been sent to press and will be mailed out shortly, about St. Joan of Arc, because it is this year is the 100th anniversary of her canonization, and as readers will see, what she went through to become canonized is quite extraordinary and unbelievable. Yes. Multiple ecclesiastical trials, both during her lifetime and after her lifetime. So it's really amazing to see the stark contrast between the old process and the new.
Yes.
And before we jump into our first news story today, I just wanted to remind viewers that this coming Sunday is the great feast of Pentecost. And again, in the traditional Roman calendar, it's actually, most people may not realize this, it's second only to the solemnity of all solemnities, Easter, as far as its importance on the Roman calendar. And Brian might be able to add a little bit for us on this, but I just wanted to explain really quickly that just like with Easter, each day within the octave of Pentecost is actually an extension of the feast itself, just like Easter week.
Yes, it's again, we know it's important because it has an octave, a liturgical octave, and a vigil. And interestingly, pre-Pius XII's pontificate, in all prior centuries, the Vigil of Pentecost, which we still have, the vigil, but it was much more elaborate. It was actually very similar to the Easter Vigil in terms of its elaborate ceremonies, blessing. You get the blessing of the holy water again. But again, we still do have a vigil, but a lot of that is a little more simplified since Pius XII. But all of those marks show how important a feast it is. Mark, again, second only to the solemnity of Easter.
Yes. All right, so that thus concludes our liturgical commentary for this week. And we'll jump right into the news now. So our first story concerns an archbishop, very well known to our readers and viewers, Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano. And, amongst the modern hierarchy, he is certainly one who stands out. We talk about heroic virtue. Now, only God knows if he's exercising heroic virtue in his life currently, but he's certainly doing much more than most, I would say. That's pretty evident. So 3 weeks ago, viewers may recall, this was on May 8th, we reported on the Appeal for the Church and the World, which was released on May 7th. And it's an initiative led by Archbishop Vigano and aimed at challenging what it calls unacceptable forms of restriction on freedoms in relation both to individuals and the church. It really does an excellent job of articulating and defending what we mentioned earlier, the libertas ecclesiae, that was defended so well by Pope St. Gregory VII back in the 11th century. So this week, Archbishop Vigano has published a defense of that appeal, of which he is the primary catalyst and author, in response to criticisms from a German rabbi. And Brian has pulled up on the screen now Dr. Micah Hickson's report on this for LifeSite News. I'll just read a little bit from the introduction to help people understand the details of the story. So Micah Hickson reports, Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano has responded to a German rabbi, Jehoshua Ahrens, who called the Vigano appeal concerning the coronavirus and its dangers for constitutional liberties a, quote, shock, adding that he is glad that the German bishops have distanced themselves from it. We have more about some of those German bishops coming up later in today's show. She goes on, the Italian prelate defended issuing the May 7th appeal, stating, quote, I think it is the duty of each one of us to express our concerns about a situation that, taking advantage of the COVID crisis, goes far beyond reasonable safety measures, imposing on entire nations the deprivation of constitutional freedoms, end quote. So this critique by a Rabbi Ahrens originally appeared apparently in the German bishop's official news website, which is KATHOLIC, LISCH, katholisch.de. And it also, I guess it first appeared in a German newspaper. So in other words, the German bishops are giving kind of a formal approbation or approval of this man's critique. And I just wanted to read a couple of statements in Archbishop Vigano's full letter in response to this rabbi. He says, Dear Rabbi Ahrens, since I have been criticized for my appeal for the church and the world, I ask the German bishop's website to give me permission to answer you. I must tell you, Dr. Ahrens, that I am not a little surprised by your words when you say, quote, we have known for some time that there are people within the churches who adhere to such theories, but now they have the courage to express these opinions even more openly, end quote. So as I understand it, the rabbi is essentially dismissing the appeal as nothing but a crack or a harebrained conspiracy theory, talking about the formation of a new world order and such things, when phrases like that are quoted from globalists themselves. It's not something that traditionalists have made up over the years. So he says, Archbishop Vigano says further down, to dismiss these concerns, which have been expressed moreover by reputable personalities as conspiracy theories, so-called, does not seem to me a constructive attitude, especially if one does not have the merit of disproving what is considered untrue. So you can't just call it names without actually disproving the concerns, in other words. So Archbishop Vigano says, I therefore ask you, in what specifically do you disagree with the text of the appeal? What in the appeal represents a shock for you? And then he goes on to say, draw some spiritual, make some spiritual connections. You know, he's obviously talking to a modern Jewish person who doesn't recognize our Lord. And here's what he says, which I found very interesting. Archbishop Vigano says, "Let us now come to the spiritual significance of COVID. In the Old Testament, there are many examples of punishments sent to the chosen people by God, and the prophets many times warned the Jews to abandon idolatry and not to contaminate themselves with the pagans and to remain faithful to the one true God." He goes on, "This vision which the Church of Christ shares shows us a just and merciful God who rewards the good and punishes the wicked, who, like a loving father, punishes also his disobedient children to bring them back to follow his holy law." And then he also talks about there was a time when, with the obedience of the masses, a hellish dictatorship committed a very serious crime, making itself responsible for the deportation and death of millions of innocent people only because of their faith and line of descent. He's referring, of course, to the Nazi regime. And then he says, even then, the mainstream media praised those in power and remained silent about their crimes. Even then, doctors and scientists lent their work to a delusional plan of domination. Even then, those who dared to raise their voices were accused of, quote, conspiracy theories. So in other words, he's saying, kind of calling this rabbi on the carpet, saying, do you not realize that you're espousing the same kind of mindset that led to the destruction of your people, you know, two generations ago during the Second World War? Mm. So I think we want to commend Archbishop Vigano for standing up as he is and defending the appeal that is a very good text for our times.
Yes, very, very true. And as actually reports on in our forthcoming June issue, it's really good to pause and see how much good Archbishop has developed over the past couple of years. And it's sort of what traditionalists have said we've wanted all along, that we've asked that the hierarchy will start waking up and we'll start realizing these things. And so again, it's important for all of us who've been saying that for decades, when we see evidence of it, right, to commend it, right? Does that mean, I don't know Archbishop Vigano, I haven't discussed everything with him in complete detail, but what I do see is definitely headed in the right direction. And again, we don't want to have that mentality, oh, we've known all along, why is he just figuring this out now?
So yes, so I totally concur with Brian's comment. We need to give credit where credit is due, and I think it certainly is due at this time to Archbishop Vigano.
Yes. So transitioning to our next story, which you were referencing the German Bishops' Conference here website there, we go to the People's Republic of the Diocese of Munich and Freising, which is headed by Marx, by Cardinal Marx. So a story was reported this week from both by, originally I think by Catholic News Agency, but then LifeSite also has a story on it, that the Munich Statistical Office has reported that the highest number of Catholics in this diocese last year, 2019, formally withdrew from the Catholic Church. 10,744 Catholics formally withdrew their membership in the church, which tops the previous record of departures, which was 9,010. Now, a little bit of explanation is necessary here to see what is this formal departure. Well, one of the settlements that occurred in Germany after the sort of religious conflict between Protestant and Catholic Germany. So remember, Germany, the German Empire under the Habsburgs was Catholic. There was a big war. Lots of the parts of Germany, principalities, went Lutheran. And eventually they reached various settlements that developed into the modern world. And one of those was produced the so-called German church tax, which says that about 8 to 9% of individual income tax that's paid in Germany is collected by the state and then given to whichever church you formally belong to. So again, unlike England, where they just established a Protestant church and said, that's it, the rest of you get punished, The German settlement said, well, we're going to recognize certain denominations, so it's not everything, but sort of Lutheran, Catholic, a few others, say if you belong to one of these churches, we will take the money you pay in tax and use it to maintain those churches, those buildings. That was the original settlement. But then eventually it turned into we just hand the money over to those churches. So if you are a registered member of the Catholic Church, you pay, again, depends a little bit, but 8 to 9% income tax that goes directly to the German Bishops' Conference. So the only way to stop paying this tax is to go in and formally apostatize in a Catholic sense, but in the secular sense, say, I cut all ties with the church and say you are outside of the church. And then you stop paying this tax and it stops going to bishops. So what's interesting is these numbers have been rising. And again, this is not the whole country. This is just this one diocese. This many people have gone to this step. So again, it's unlike sort of typical apostasy where you just sort of lose the faith, stop going, or you just fall away. It just sort of happens naturally. You have to take you have to take a formal juridical act, go down to this office, sign, a formal legal document. So that's usually a barrier to people, right, to doing something. But this is important enough, and the research shows, Bavarian Public Broadcasting Company did some research showing that overwhelmingly the reason is they don't want to pay the tax. Now, what's the underlying causes of that? Some of it is, people become atheists, and they say, well, why am I paying a tax to a church I don't believe in? So a lot of it is protest against some of the sexual abuse scandals in Germany that were uncovered. But more importantly, what's interesting is that it's Catholics who don't want to see their money going to their bishops. So it's people that are saying, I don't want to pay this tax because of the awful things that the bishops, especially Cardinal Marx, are doing, and therefore I'm taking this step to stop paying the tax. Now, what are some of those things Marx is doing? Well, just one example. In 2019 at Christmas, he made a declaration that he was in favor of blessing homosexual couples. And this is a quote from him from the Catholic News Agency article. The Archbishop of Munich and Freising, Cardinal Reinhard Marx, at Christmas 2019 expressed his view that homosexual couples can receive a church blessing in the sense of a pastoral accompaniment in the Catholic Church.
You're using that classic Francis boilerplate language.
Very much so. But again, clearly contradicting the Catholic faith. You can never bless a sin, right? And this is whatever, again, about subjective intentions of people or their knowledge, or do they have full consent of the will? Objectively, what they're doing is sinful. And you can never bless that, right?
Right.
That's not possible. And even the modernists, Vatican, CDF has said, it confirmed, Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith has confirmed this. Well, interesting end of this story is, the German bishops you can't get excommunicated for advocating blessing homosexual unions. You can't get excommunicated for advocating, promiscuity, fornication, adultery. You don't get excommunicated for engaging in sexual abuse. The German bishops, in reacting to these people leaving, show us the only thing that is an excommunicable crime. That is going and signing this document and not paying the church tax. According to the German Bishops' Conference, if you stop paying the church tax, you are denied the sacraments, you are denied Christian burial, you are forbidden to be a godparent. Again, you're essentially excommunicated. Now, if you formally apostatize from the church, this is a normal reaction, but it just shows the hypocrisy of the German Bishops' Conference. What Cardinal Marx says is something that deserves ecclesiastical punishment, which he will never get from his fellow bishops. But who's the only people they throw the book at? People that stop paying the tax. That's all they care about. That's all they clearly care about is follow them.
And specifically, if they want to stop paying that tax because they care about orthodoxy, they care about the integrity of the faith and morals.
Right, exactly. For at least some, yes. So interesting development, and why in many ways, Germany is an extreme example, because not only are this doesn't even take into account Catholics they're losing who are never baptized, right? People who just gone atheist and don't even baptize their children. So the number of Catholics is declining, as it is all around the world. But it's even declining further by people who are formally taking this step. It's just showing the fruits of what it can do.
Yes, and this is, and also in other German-speaking countries that came out, the article that you quoted Cardinal Marx from, another article from Catholic News Agency, the headline says, "Book calling for Catholic blessing of homosexual couples was requested by Austrian Bishops' Conference."
Yes.
The Archbishop of Salzburg himself requested one of his priests, a so-called liturgist, to put together a book which is entitled, unbelievably, "The Benediction of Same-Sex Partnerships." It's unbelievable.
Well, again, Marx may be the root of this, but there's a Politburo ruling Germanic parts of the church. So he's not he's at the top of the heap, but there are many others that are working with him.
And without a peep from the current Roman pontiff is perhaps the most scandalous.
Yes, very true. So moving back to the U.S., I want to update a story we have been reporting on, and that is the legal challenges of Mr. Deladen, who, as many may know, exposed the crimes of Planned Parenthood for buying, selling, and trafficking and profiteering off of human body parts that they are tearing apart from aborted babies. And first, we know he was criminally charged in an effort led by Kamala Harris, who was then, before she was a senator, who was then the Attorney General. He was subjected to a civil trial, but then he was reported most recently turned his guns the other way. Rather than defense, he was on offense and sued, is making this lawsuit against Harris, the state of California, and the current Attorney General for their persecution of him for exposing the truth here. So this week, his organization released a press release where he is making available documents and testimony that was obtained in his legal challenges, where Planned Parenthood officials admit what they were doing clearly.
Under oath, yes.
Under oath, under oath. Now, these appear to be depositions, not in a trial. Depositions are when you interview people before the trial under oath. It is still under oath. But right. The questions are going and the lack of judges ruling on objections, they appear to be deposition. But in their press release, they embed a video which shows many scenes from these depositions where a whole variety of cast of characters admit what's going on. At the very beginning of the video, again, unlike some people who sort of make accusations online, he says you can find all of this testimony at the California court system, and he gives the civil action number, says, you can read all this for yourself. So yes, I'm highlighting this down to I think it's a 14-minute video, but he says you can read everything yourself. So he's drawing on now publicly available court records. And I'm just going to play a quick clip from one of them. You can see the sort of things he's exposing.
Planned Parenthood told Congress they rebuffed the deal, and the New York Times reported Planned Parenthood's assurances that the affiliate declined. But now...
And by that, declined an offer to buy and sell body parts is what they didn't do.
We know that Planned Parenthood lied to Congress and to the media because of the documents and testimony of Tram Nguyen, Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast Abortion Center Director.
It's an email from Robert Sarkis to Melissa Farrell and copies you and other people, dated June 30, 2015. And it attaches an agreement between Biomax and Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast. If you just turn to the last page of the document, it says that the fee to Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast for a fetal liver would be $750, and the fee for fetal liver and a thymus would be $1,600. This is an email chain between you and Doe 9012, who is the Regional Medical and Surgical Services Director, who we understand is Diane Santos. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Do you say, FYI, we're still trying to move forward with this? She responds to you and says, do you want to do this? You respond to her and say, yes, ma'am. Do you remember that exchange?
Not until yesterday.
Okay. So you wanted to move forward with the contract we just saw with those price terms?
Objection. Mischaracterized the document. Mischaracterized the testimony. Vague. I know I wanted to move forward with it.
Is there anything in writing that says that you didn't agree with the compensation?
objection, vague. No.
Well, again, there you have it, and there's more examples right from their own mouth, just blatantly admitting what they told Congress under oath and in responding to Congress that they didn't do, caught red-handed.
Yes. So
I will note that Mr. Dilaudid, as a footnote to the story, is being represented by the St. Thomas More Society, whom our contributor and longtime Catholic Family News columnist Chris Ferrara is an affiliate counsel. He works with them. And they and Chris are representing Father Kevin Robinson in a lawsuit we've mentioned, we've reported on previously, suing the governor of New Jersey for shutting down Catholic worship. And so it's the same organization is working with Mr. Dilaudid as supports Chris.
yes, so it is truly, as I characterized it the last time we reported on it, is truly a case of David versus Goliath, definitely.
Yes, yes.
So we hope and pray that we know God is always with those who are on the right side of things. So we hope and pray that Thomas More Society and Mr. Dilaudid prove to be victorious in this case, because it's obvious, it's very clear that who is in the right and who is in the wrong.
Yes. Speaking of prayer, Matt's going to start our next story, which begins, which is about a prayer.
Exactly right. So
Prayer, in quotes.
yeah, exactly. So viewers and our readers may recall that in early March of this year, Pope Francis released a video message regarding Catholics in China, and we're going to play this video clip. He's essentially exhorting the Catholics in China to be so-called truly Christians and to be good citizens. They should promote the gospel, but without engaging in proselytism. So we're going to play this brief clip. And
Hoy día en China, la Iglesia mira hacia adelante con la esperanza. La Iglesia quiere que los cristianos chinos sean cristianos en serio y que sean buenos ciudadanos. Deben promover el Evangelio, pero sin hacer proselitismo y alcanzar la unidad de la comunidad católica que está dividida. Recemos juntos para que la Iglesia en China persevere en la fidelidad al Evangelio y crezca en unidad. Gracias.
all right, so there's obviously several things that need to be said in response to that video message. But before we get to that, I just want to explain the reason why we're reporting on this again this week is that this past Sunday, May 24th, Francis again alluded to his desire for Chinese Catholics to be, quote, good citizens during remarks made following the weekly prayer of the Regina Caeli on Sundays. You know, during outside of Easter time, it's the Angelus that he prays. And then he usually gives some, like a brief address attached to the prayer, both before and after. So LifeSite News reported on this earlier in the week. Let me see, I'll pull up the quote here regarding what he said most recently. So after praying the Angelus, he said, we entrust to the guidance and protection of our Heavenly Mother, the pastors and faithful of the Catholic Church in that great country, referring to China, so that they may be strong in faith and firm in fraternal union, joyful witnesses and promoters of charity and fraternal hope, and good citizens, end quote. So the primary problem here, I mean, first of all, obviously the church has always exhorted the faithful, even during the first few centuries when Catholics were under the pagan Roman emperors. Of course, we have to be good citizens. The problem is that Francis is not defining what it means to be a good citizen. And we also know that he has very notorious sympathies towards socialism and even outright communism. One example that comes to mind is him accepting that abominable hammer and sickle crucifix when he met the communist dictator Evo Morales several years ago. He's also been quoted by the infamous Eugenio Scalfari, Italian journalist, saying that if anyone, it's the communists who think like Christians. So we know that Pope Francis has he has socialist communist leanings. So it's very concerning to hear him say to Chinese Catholics, those who are under an evil communist regime, just to tell them without qualification, you need to be good citizens.
And the ambiguity there is, to be a good citizen means to do what good citizens would do, which is truly for the common good. But the ambiguity is, what he seems to be suggesting is, shut up and do what the communists tell you. Be blindly obedient citizens, which is what communism wants, right?
Right.
But your example in the Roman Empire, when the church said be good citizens, they absolutely made clear that it did not mean go offer incense in public to the gods, because that's what good Roman citizens do. No, good Roman citizens refuse, because it is not good for the state to offer for false worship. And again, he's not drawing that distinction in any way. And
I think the other reason, as it's drawn out in the LifeSite report, the reason why this comment to be good citizens is so concerning is in light of the 2018 sellout essentially of the true church in China to the so-called Chinese Patriotic Catholic Association, which is really just a department of the Chinese Communist Party, which parades around looking similar to the Catholic Church, but it's just a communist organization that attempts to dupe Catholics into thinking that they are being faithful Catholics by participating in this. So in our current, go ahead.
Oh no, absolutely, because you see at the root of this, he keeps talking about divided, be one, and it's the false notion of unity, right? True unity, we know from St. Paul, is unity in the true faith, the true sacraments, and the one governance of the pastors. False unity is not equivalent to true unity, right? And the communist wants unity, but on false principles, right?
Yes.
So again, unity in and of itself is not good, right? To be unified in your attempt to persecute and torture people is a bad kind of unity. Right?
Yes.
Kind of the true good unity is unity in the truth. So again, to just want, this has been the whole problem since Vatican II, to just want unity. Well, unity about what? That's the critical question.
Yes, exactly right. So in the current issue of Catholic Family News, our monthly newspaper, we ran some excerpts from a very important 1958 encyclical of Pope Pius XII, Ad Apostolorum Principis, when Pius XII wrote on communism and the church in China. And he really rightfully so, blasts the schismatic Chinese Patriotic Catholic Association, the state-run so-called church, and exhorts the faithful as follows, quote, "If Christians are bound in conscience to render to Caesar, that is to human authority, what belongs to Caesar, then Caesar likewise, or those who control the state, cannot exact obedience when they would be usurping God's rights or forcing Christians either to act at variance with their religious duties or to sever themselves from the unity of the church and its lawful hierarchy." I want to pause there for just a second, because part of the 2018 Accord, Sino-Vatican Agreement, is essentially recognizing as legitimate the Chinese Patriotic Catholic Association, and that their bishops are no longer excommunicated or schismatic, that the Chinese government has a say in putting forth candidates for the episcopacy, and then Rome supposedly gets to have the final say, which Cardinal Joseph Zen certainly doesn't buy that explanation. So that's the problem, is that it's encouraging Catholics to think that they can legitimately belong to the Patriotic Association and still be faithful Catholics, when that association is not under the power of Rome. It's under the power of the Chinese Communist Party. So Pius XII continues in his encyclical, he says, quote, "Under such circumstances," in other words, when Catholics are being told to sever themselves from the unity of the church and its lawful hierarchy, under such circumstances, every Christian should cast aside all doubt and calmly and firmly repeat the words with which Peter and the other apostles answered the first persecutors of the church. We must obey God rather than men, end quote. So the document that people really need to be looking to is regarding the current situation in the church in China is definitely this 1958 encyclical, because it expresses the true principles of the church.
Very true. And again, we'll point out, as we said before, in fact, they can't even reference the 2018 document because the Vatican has kept it secret.
Right.
They've entered into this protocol, this treaty with the communists that they say is so great, but it's so great that they can't let us read it. Now, this reminds me of like if you ever raise your children and children do something, you know they did something wrong. What do you do? Oh, nothing. What'd you do? Oh, I can't tell you. Well,
right.
If you do anything wrong, why can't you tell me? If this is such a great deal, right? Why does it have to remain secret? Because obviously they have betrayed the faith.
Not only are they keeping it secret just in general, but they won't even allow Cardinal Zen, who is the retired Bishop of Hong Kong, they won't even let him see it.
Yes.
And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why. And Cardinal Zen is no dummy. He understands what's going on here. He talks about that essentially Rome tragically has sold out the true church in China, and they're trying to bring the underground church above ground, essentially, so it can be annihilated. Mm-hmm. So very concerning situation. As a brief addendum to this story, Catholic News Agency also reported this week that one of the heroes of the underground, the true church in China, his name is Joseph Zhu Baiyu. I apologize if I butchered that name. He is the Bishop Emeritus of Nanyang, and he died recently at the age of 98 years old. He was ordained prior to Vatican II. He grew up during the Chinese Civil War and endured the horrors of the Mao Zedong empire dynasty, the tyranny, basically.
Yes.
So I'm sure that he did not agree with this 2018 Vatican China Accord by any means.
Very true. So for our final story, our end is in our beginning. We talked about St. Gregory VII, Pope, that defended the principle, the freedom of the church, that the secular temporal authorities, although they have a sphere in which they have rights to rule, have no authority over the church, particularly the church's regulation of the sacraments and the bestowing. In that case, he was really dealing with the bestowing of orders and consecrations of bishops. But particularly in more general point, have no authority over the administration of the sacraments. And as we've reported here many times, Catholic Family News, the bishops have betrayed St. Gregory VII in a time when that principle was to be defended, and defended sometimes with their life. St. Thomas Becket, he defended the principle, the freedom of the church, on a slightly different particular issue, but the same principle with his life in the 12th century. But our bishops have rolled over, just like the Vatican to the communists, as we were just talking about, rolled over and just gone like sheep to the slaughter.
If not like actively participated.
Well, if not actively participating, yeah. If not actually gleefully participating in shutting the church, having the civil authorities shut the church down. And again, when you strike the shepherd, the assistant shepherds, the hirelings will follow. And again, this starts at the top. Pope Francis did it himself in Italy, and the bishops all around the world have not defended the freedom of the church and the essential nature of religion, but have betrayed it. Well, finally, someone has spoken out to defend this principle. And this happened at
most unlikely of characters.
Yes. Won't tell you who it is yet. You'll see in a second. Has said what needs to be said. You've probably already guessed it's not a bishop, but here he is.
Today I'm identifying houses of worship, churches, synagogue, and mosques as essential places that provide essential services. Some governors have deemed liquor stores and abortion clinics as essential, but have left out churches and other houses of worship. It's not right. So I'm correcting this injustice and calling houses of worship essential. I call upon governors to allow our churches and places of worship to open right now. If there's any question, they're going to have to call me, but they're not going to be successful in that call. These are places that hold our society together and keep our people united. The people are demanding to go to church and synagogue, go to their mosque. Many millions of Americans embrace worship as an essential part of life. The ministers, pastors, rabbis, imams, and other faith leaders will make sure that their congregations are safe as they gather and pray. I know them well. They love their congregations. They love their people. They don't want anything bad to happen to them or to anybody else.
Now, obviously, it's President Trump. He is not a bishop. And so his defense is imperfect, right? He lumps together the true church with, other false religions. Granted, so we grant that point. But my point is, the essence of his message, that religion and the worship of God is essential and that the governors have no right to shut it down, is what the bishops should be proclaiming.
Yes.
And it's a sad commentary. This is not a criticism of President Trump directly. It's a sad commentary that is left to a non-Catholic who doesn't even fully appreciate what he's saying in its fullness to be defending in such strong terms what the bishop should be.
Right. He actually goes on in that clip to say that if and this was happened during last Friday during a press conference, by the way, and he goes on to say that if the governors will not comply, that he will override the governors. And again, that's really what the bishop should be saying, that they're going to override
the governors and
the
do
governors.
it anyway. Yeah, and,
Right.
and put, obey God rather than men. And a lot of people criticize Trump for that line. Again, what I think he meant by it is that he's going to bring the Justice Department in to, go after the governors to discredit it, is what I think he meant. But again, all these people, he doesn't know, he's a dictator, But in any event, what's sad about this is, again, there are people waking up, like the president, who are saying, wait, this is out of control. This can't be the case. How can you say that a liquor store is essential and a church isn't? How can you say it's essential to kill perfectly healthy babies, right, is essential? And then that is just so hypocritical that he's pointing it out, and he's not the only one. So there's a group of churches that have been suing across the country. In California, two important ones in California and Illinois have gone to the Supreme Court for what's called an emergency order. So they say, yeah, we've got our lawsuit in the court system, but it's going to take months and years to get to you. We want you to immediately order the governor to stop his order, to give churches the right to open this Sunday. So you go to the Supreme Court and you can sort of say, look, before you get to the merits, the idea is if you think we have a chance of winning, give us relief now while we're playing this out. And so they had to file things by Thursday night. And the Supreme Court will decide, again, not on the ultimate question, but whether they should be allowed to open while the court case proceeds. Interestingly, Governor Pritzker in Illinois responded and said, I have every right to do it, but oh, by the way, I'm going to exempt churches right now, which is sort of a clear admission that he knew he went beyond the law. Even though he says, oh, I don't think I did anything wrong. He's like, you know what, now that I think about it, I'm going to exempt them right now. California did not, so it's still a live issue in California. Basically backed down at the courthouse steps because he knew, I think, he was going to lose. But the important thing about this story is that none of the plaintiffs in those cases are Catholic bishops or Catholic churches. They are Pentecostal and some other Protestant denominations. And so, to my knowledge, again, as far as I can do scanning the news, the only Catholic that is bringing this kind of lawsuit is the one we reported on, Chris Ferrara, representing Father Kevin Robinson in New Jersey, suing the governor of New Jersey, who's progressing in his case. One Catholic priest in the whole country, when a non-Catholic president of the United States and non-Catholic Protestant denominations are willing to go all the way to the Supreme Court to defend the church's principles. So the church's principle of libertas ecclesiae is being defended by those who are not even her own, when her own have betrayed her. I can only think of the words of St. John Fisher, in the English Reformation, when the English bishops voted to break with Rome and go into schism and heresy, he said, the fort has been betrayed by those who should have defended it. And we can add, and is being defended by those who've betrayed it.
Right.
It's just the upside down world we're in. But we'll watch these cases, and again, a hope would be that the Supreme Court will rule appropriately in due course on the permanent issue and make clear that governors have no right to shut down and just to forbid Catholic priests from offering the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our stories for this week. We thank you for joining us, as always, watching this news program. If you enjoy the program, we ask that you please subscribe to our YouTube channel, that you like the video. Please share it on social media with your family and friends to help us spread the word. And ultimately, if you enjoy the free content that we offer online, we do ask for your support of our newspaper, and that you would purchase a subscription to help us keep the presses rolling and give us the ability to produce. I mentioned earlier the June paper is forthcoming. It's been printed and be mailed out soon. I'm going to be posting on the website kind of an update, so to speak, on our CFN operations in light of the ongoing COVID-19 situation. As we've alluded to before, we've faced several obstacles in being able to conduct our business because of various closures and such. So I'm going to be posting on our website an update for viewers and specifically for subscribers, so you know what's going on and what to expect in the coming weeks. We certainly hope that we can get back to business as usual as soon as possible.
We hope. But again, a quick reminder on that. Read the announcement for details. But presently, we're only selling electronic access subscriptions. Although we are able to print and eventually mail the paper these days, we're not able to update our mailing list for physical mailings. And so we made the decision last week to just sell e-edition, electronic access. So you can get the paper the day, June 1st of each month, the first day that it's out. But because we didn't feel we could sell paper subscriptions at a time when we couldn't get labels printed up to mail them to you. That's all we're selling at present. If anybody, as we've announced, had subscribed before we made that change, you should have e-edition access. If you have any trouble with that, contact us through the website. But we will hold your subscription and start the paper copies once we're able to update you, and you'll get a full year of papers from that point. So again, we apologize. We've had to sort of adapt on the fly given not knowing what was going on and when things would change. But essentially our database where we do the mailings from is locked in an office that we can't get to. But that's the most important point, but all the other further details, please look at the website for the full announcement.
Yes. All right, so as we always do, we'll close by praying together a Hail Mary and entrusting ourselves and our families, friends, all of our work to Jesus through Mary. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Our Lady of Fatima,
Pray for us.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.
Well, happy Pentecost to you, and see you next week.
Yes, God bless you.
Alleluia.